You're looking more and more like Dave. Good move. Putting on the
flannel.
Flannel is a big help. Is flanneling up kind of like women putting all their makeup on and stuff?
Yeah.
It's an important night. I better flannel up.
I better flannel up. You might run into some neighbors at dinner.
This is Penn Sunday School.
Yeah, there we go.
And to our listening ears, all angels sing and round us rings the music of the
Look at him go.
Brothers and sisters, welcome to Penn Sunday School, starring Penn Gillette. My name is Michael Godot, and we are broadcasting from the Show Creator Studios in Las Vegas. Today, we're recording a frequently asked questions episode. Reddy has compiled a bunch of the regular questions, and today we're going to answer them. So here we go. Preach and love, Mr. Penn Gillette. Yeah, we're kind of rushed on that one. I didn't have time to, write out.
Well, we got to write out.
I don't know.
Frequently asked questions is all it is. Hello, you angel-headed hipsters. We are preaching love, and this is love that's mostly paperwork.
Yeah.
But we've done something odd with this show. The podcast itself is a rather standard podcast. It started out in the radio show with me and Godot.
CBS, yeah.
And CBS, and then I was with Adam Carolla on see, what I did was they gave me an ultimatum on CBS, right?
Yeah.
Our show was doing very well on there. Very well. Even though the guy that follows us up in the Northern California area called on his listeners to kill me.
Right.
It was a little one of the darker chapters.
Sure.
In CBS history. There were lawsuits. We were deposed.
We should also know that they were unsuccessful.
Yes, they were. They were. They offered money. What was it, $5,000?
I don't remember.
$5,000, I think, if you killed me, and $7,000 if I suffered. I'm not joking.
I know.
I'm not joking. Nor were they.
Yeah.
What came up was...
It turns out his salary's not what people expected.
Here is the deal. A failed radio guy, strangely enough, who I'd been on his show. And because I do everybody's show, right?
Yeah.
And so I'd been at his show before, and we, made jokes and pimped whatever show we were doing. And then we were doing a show, and there was a rumor, just one of these nutty rumors that nobody believes, but if you're doing a daily radio show, you do shtickle on.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to back up a little bit.
Okay.
Just a little bit. Stern is the biggest thing that ever happened in radio.
Yes.
And Howard Stern was leaving to take a sweetheart deal to go to XM.
Yep.
Now, he'd recreated radio. Now, the powers that be in radio wanted to find out, how can we keep the same ratings Howard has? They don't understand regression to the mean.
Yes.
Okay. Howard is a phenomenon.
Yeah.
Howard recreated the form. Howard did everything. And Howard did that with raw skill, coupled with right place at the right time, huge amount of luck.
Yeah.
The million choices that he could make that were random, he made them right. So I love to go to these sports analogies.
Yes.
Right? It's the cover of Sports Illustrated curse, right?
Yeah.
Whenever someone's on the cover of Sports Illustrated, their career after that doesn't go as well.
Right.
The reason is not a curse, but regression of the mean.
Yeah.
If you were celebrated the best year of your life, the next year is going to be worse. My father was a little over 6 foot.
Uh-huh.
I'm 6'7". My son will probably be 6'3", 6'4". Regression to the mean. Okay? It's always going to be that. Okay? So when you get rid of Howard, okay, you're going to go regression to the mean. Even, and this is impossible, but even if the next guy was as good as Howard, Let's say the next guy is absolutely in every way as good as Howard. Now, Howard's the best there's ever been. There's not going to be another best, but say there is. There's still going to be regression to the mean because that whole build-up, all of it that seemed right, that seemed special, that seemed magic.
And it took Howard years to build that into that success.
Sure. It's like...
And so they want you to jump in the first day hitting those home runs that Howard hit.
Yeah.
It's like the idiots who say, we need someone like Walt Disney to run Disney now. There's plenty of people like Walt Disney.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs. Bill Gates. They're running their own companies. Disney can't hire them away.
Yeah.
You just can't do that, okay? So the way Tim Jennison puts this is shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. Grandfather makes the money. Son establishes the money, grandson loses the money. Shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves, 3 generations. That's the way it goes. We're seeing it happen with Apple, right?
Yeah.
Got a great guy in there, whatever his name is, Tim Cook, right?
Yeah.
Great guy, not Steve Jobs. Okay? We go from this is something that reinvents the world to now I can be a talking unicorn.
Yeah.
That's regression to me. So Howard Stern is leaving, and I want to say this with the utmost humility. I am not a radio guy. I am not as smart as Howard. I don't have my finger on the pulse like Howard. But among the hundreds of people they talked to about going into Howard's slot, they talked to me. Mm-hmm. And they said to me a few things that were pretty funny. One was they said they would just buy out Penn and Teller. And when I said, no, I like doing Penn and Teller, they said, I love this, they said, well, you'll have no trouble doing Penn and Teller at night, being done at midnight, prepping the show in Vegas, starting it at 3 a.m., doing your 4 hours on the air, doing a recap afterwards with the staff, then going to sleep and getting up and doing your show after that. It'll be no problem. It fits right in with doing the live show in Vegas. To which I referred them to the Navy studies of sleep deprivation. And I told them, here's when psychosis sets in. And you may think that Howard's a wacky, crazy guy, but he is not under sleep deprivation psychosis.
Right.
So there was never a real offer. I want to make that very clear. I don't want anybody pulling this out and saying, oh, Penn's claiming he was offered. I was not offered it. Some guy at some level sat me down and talked for a half an hour.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they were probably talking for 20 hours to all the other guys who really did say no.
Right.
Said no with a contract in front of them.
And they were like, we'll buy out Van Halen.
Yeah.
That's what they did.
We need someone that'll be easy to be hated after that. What they did get out of me was, you'll do an hour show a day on CBS. And we did an hour show. Godot was my co-host.
Yeah.
And we had a fabulous time doing it. We had fun doing it.
Fantastic show.
Really fun doing it. Really fun.
I was a listener to that show when I used to drive into New York. I loved that show.
And we loved it. And the really funny thing was there was a studio. You never saw it. But there was a studio in New York, CBS.
I talk to them all the time, though.
Yeah. But there was a studio.
Yeah.
And it said on the door, Penn Radio, right?
Yeah.
And it would go on the air when I was on. And there would then be an engineer sitting in there confabbing with Godot and with Patrick, getting the whole thing to go across there. And I arrived there once to do some liners and also do one show there live. And everybody said, we wonder how you get in the studio and out without us seeing you, like in the parking lot. I said, I'm not there. They had the studio set up. So we did, how long did we go? A year?
2 years.
2 years. We did 2 years. And they said at the end of 2 years, we can't sell a 1 hour block of time. We just can't do it. So then we had this wonderful, surreal conversation. I love this conversation more than anything. They said, we'd like you to go to 4 hours a day. I said, I can't do 4 hours a day. They said, we can't sell an hour. I said, well, I can't do 4 hours a day. 4 hours a day means with a show at night. I also have a family now. I'll just die. And they said, well, we can probably sell 2 hours. And then they said a sentence that I absolutely love. They said, you know, Penn, 2 hours isn't any more than 1 hour. I said, I believe it's 1 hour more. They said, no, it isn't. I said, yes, it is. They said, no. See, you got to come in, you got to prep, you got to get ready, you got to get afterwards, and all that prep is the same amount of time, and all the afterwards is the same amount of time. It's really no longer. I said, it's really 1 hour longer. it's 1 hour to 2 hours. That's 1 hour longer. 2 minus 1 equals 1. They said, no, you're looking at it wrong. That conversation went back and forth.
Yeah.
So then I said to them, well, why don't I give you 4 hours? They said, whoop-de-doo. I said, once a week. I'll do 4 hours once a week. And I said, how about I do 4 hours on Sunday called Penn Sunday School? Wouldn't that be great? And they said, how about 2 hours a day? It's no more than what you're doing now. And they tried, or they claimed to try. We never know in show business, but
Yeah.
I'm telling you what I heard or what I remember. They tried to sell 4 hours a day and couldn't do it. And so we wound down Penn Sunday School. It was very, very, very sad. But boy, was there more time in the day after that.
2 hours.
And then I went on Celebrity Apprentice, and Adam Carolla was talking about the wonders of podcasting. And I said I always wanted to do a show called Penn Sunday School. And he said, do it. And I went, oh, I don't know if I can really do the full 4 hours. Do it anything like they want. I said, oh, so I'll just come on, do it. I said, I don't know if we could really gear up to you. Just come on and do it. Just do it. It's easy. So we have to make a deal. He said, well, the deal's made. Just do it.
If anybody knows Adam Carolla, that is absolutely what goes into starting all of his podcasts. He has like 30 now.
It does seem, it may seem like he's giving artistic control.
Yeah.
But what it is you don't really understand the profound laziness of Adam Carolla. It's astonishing. It's really astonishing. It's something beautiful to see. He's fallen into that Bill Murray groove where he just is.
What they say is stand-up. He doesn't write a stand-up. He just kind of thinks about stuff and then goes on and starts talking to the crowd.
Well, that's also because he that's why he can't write his stand-up. He can't write. We have very little evidence he can read. But Adam...
Indeed, he will not read his own books.
Right, he can't. He makes them up.
He does a book on tape. He just retells.
Tell me what this chapter was about, and I'll riff on it. Which is actually a good economic model.
Yeah.
Because then he can sell the book and the audio book to the exact same people.
Yeah.
Who hear something different all the time. So toward the end, wasn't it, Godot, of Sunday School, there was a rumor, and one of these rumors that no one would comment on unless you're trying to fill time in a radio show.
Which currently, that's what we are doing.
Yeah. And the rumor was, for a minute, in one paper, that Paris Hilton was being considered to play Mother Teresa in the biopic. Okay?
Imagine our joy.
So I said, Paris Hilton can't play Mother Teresa. She's too moral to play Mother Teresa. Paris Hilton is essentially a good moral person, and Mother Teresa was a monster. I did a lot of the show. Not a lot of the show. I did what, a 10-minute hunk?
Yeah. No.
10-minute hunk, talking about what was wrong with Mother Teresa, using the work we did on bullshit, the research, plus Christopher Hitchens' book.
I was going to say Hitchens' book, yeah.
Missionary Position.
Yeah.
I told some Hitchens stories, went on, did radio. Unbeknownst to me, completely unbeknownst to me, but known to Godot. And Godot was under strict rules that he was not to talk to me about reviews or what he said about the show. So there was he was in the very awkward position of often keeping information from his coworker and very, very good
pal, yeah.
and very good friend.
Yes.
So he was very often during this show in possession of information that he would certainly talk to me about that he wasn't allowed to by our relationship on the air. I don't want to hear about this. So Godot knew there was this Kahuli up in Northern California who was a Catholic, who was doing his show. His show was local, my show was national. But his show, the first hour, sometimes the first 2 hours of his show, were commenting on my show.
Yeah, so he would sit for the hour and listen to us, and then go on to the air and whine about us. We were filling his time. It was easy for him to do 2 hours.
That's actually what I do.
We did the prep work for him.
On Sundays, because we record Ice Cream Social right after Penn Sunday School, I just go there and recap everything we
Do you really?
No, but this last Monday's episode, yes. I couldn't stop thinking about driverless cars. But that's neither here nor there.
So I didn't know he was doing that. And we were getting a lot of people writing in saying, what is this?
We also spent the second half just adjusting $7,000 for inflation from whenever Howard went off there to today's dollars. So if I put out a death threat, it would be the same rate.
Yeah, okay. So 10. So this Kahuli would be up there talking, right?
Yeah.
And Godot was very aware of it. There were a lot of complaints that were coming
People were
in.
sending me the emails. I used to do Reddy's job of answering all of the emails, and so every day there would be emails going, you guys got to talk to this guy.
You did or did not listen to his clips of him
Well,
threatening?
we're going to get to that.
Okay.
So,
When we get there, I have questions.
yeah. So, president of CBS, Big Cheese, didn't like this guy's show at all.
Right. Otherwise, he'd have a national show.
Yeah. Also, he had inherited it in some way.
Yeah.
Also, did not like talking about a show that was before, not just for esprit de corps reasons, but also because some people tune in to that show and you're forcing him to watch the show before so he could hate it. It's not good radio.
Yeah.
So they told him, quit it. Just quit it. He was also talking about the president of CBS at the time. I'm not saying his name
Right.
for two reasons. One reason, he didn't ever want his name spoken, and I'm still respecting that. And two, I forgot it.
Did you list them in order, or
No. One is actually the reason, and one is the rationalization. They're actually two different. They're actually one and one. List of reasons, list of rationalizations.
1A, 1B?
Yeah.
This guy was also this stone solid fool was also talking about the president of CBS and addressing him directly on the air. Maybe I'll give him a call. Trying to do stunt stuff like Howard.
Yeah.
To the guy that worked with Howard. I mean, foolish. The guy was incompetent and a loser.
Yeah.
He also had a sports team around him of like guys. Right? So I knew none of this. I'm just blissfully doing my show. Godot knows all of it. And then they come in. It's Friday morning. I'm about to do my show. And my direct boss, the guy right above us, gives me a call. I'm sitting in the studio like I am before the show starts, where all this phone rings. Oh, I got to take this, man. It's Bob. Okay. So I take the phone call, and he goes, Penn, I want you to know CBS takes death threats very seriously. And I say, that's a really good policy. Why are you telling me? And he says, oh, Christ. Oh, Christ. Never mind. Just do your show. We really can't talk about this now. I say, what? And you're sitting across from me. You know what he's saying on the phone. And Godot knows word for word what's happened the day before.
Yeah.
Which is him and his bunch of gigas are sitting around talking about how we said this about Paris Hilton not being immoral enough to play Mother Teresa. And he says, we should have him killed. I offer 5,000, whatever the number was. I offer 5,000. Now, I had never heard this recording, so I don't know what he said. But this is the basic idea, right?
Yeah.
$5,000 and $7,000 if he suffers.
Just to prove how much better morals a Catholic has over an atheist.
Once again.
Yeah.
I'll show this guy what a moral is.
Yeah, exactly. So they talk about this for a few minutes, right? And then let it go. And then in that same call, they talk about the president of CBS by name.
Right.
Why doesn't he fire Penn? Da, 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 da. So they have violated, without the death threat, they have done two things that the president of CBS said he would fire them for. Right? Commented on the show before and mentioned the president. Okay? They have done two fireable offenses without the death threat, which is really pretty fabulous.
Yeah.
Pretty fabulous there. Because the death threat becomes gravy. Nothing more. The turkey and the stuffing are already there for the firing. Okay. So I go, I got a death threat? And Godot, who is, I think, in the worst position this whole thing, because he is now in the position which I don't think for a moment I ever questioned you, but in Godot's heart, I mean, speaking for you, he was aware of a death threat to his friend for 22 hours, sitting on it.
Had you listened to the clip, Godot?
No, I've just been emailed about it.
You've been emailed about it?
Yeah.
Did you feel like the guy was pulling a stunt? Or I guess percentage-wise, what percentages were you giving the gravity?
A lot, because it was direct cash offer to someone to come in.
So it wasn't about that guy, but it was about any guy listening.
Yeah.
And
any listener who goes and does this, I'll pay him. It was it was, as
So it
far as I
just
can tell,
takes
just a blanket statement. And I thought, the chances that somebody is crazy enough listening on this show to try this are not
Low.
small.
Yeah. Okay.
And Godot also is operating under a promise that he won't talk to me about this stuff. He doesn't want to upset me before the show.
This is slowly becoming an Asimov novel. Two conflicting agreements.
Yeah, it is. And I believe it ripped Godot apart quite a bit. I believe that was a tough day for him.
We made it.
Yeah. And then
Did part of you, Godot, and this is just, I know it's all past. Everything's, now you're not stressed anymore, but at the time you were stressed.
Yeah.
Did part of you think about collecting that $7,000?
I was armed.
I'm here to protect you?
Yeah.
Go all Manchurian candidate.
Then I thought, God, they fired that guy, and now he doesn't have money to pay me.
well, they hadn't fired him.
Not yet.
That's the important part.
Right.
Therein lies a whole separate tale. And I've decided that this fact is going to be mostly just this story. Because the story's a pretty great story. And I haven't ever told it on the air. Right?
Who told
Parts.
I don't think
Not
you ever
the whole
told
thing,
it as in
parts.
depth like this.
We told parts, and I can't tell you. I can't split it apart from the book because I did the book for you too.
Oh, yeah.
And also, this is done under the of like what is PSS and where did it come from? So this is I don't think it's ever been framed as the origin story of what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're framing it right now.
Before you go on, let me just clarify that the people that are asking that question are normally Christians running churches in Asia or Africa.
Asking what question?
What is your show all about?
Oh, I see.
So the FAQ is coming, the source of the FAQ.
So we'll take a little break here
Okay.
and answer those people. Sunday school to me was a wonderful experience. I absolutely adored Sunday school. And many people, we're going to come back to the whole story here. Just hold where that is in your mind. We'll come back to it.
Put a pin in it.
I just was trying to not use that.
I was trying to say it obnoxiously.
many people who are religious believers, when they want to talk to me about their religion, they will say to me, when they want to explain my atheism, they will say, I'm very, very sorry that you were treated so badly by Christians in your youth, that you ran away from the church, hated the church, and went to atheism. The depth of the misunderstanding of atheism there is really profound. My experience with the Christians in the First Congregational Church, which they called First Congo, which I love, the First Congregational Church in Greenfield, Massachusetts, was 100% positive. Except for some fidgeting in the pews when I was young, every moment of that was wonderful. I liked the music. I liked the choir. The pastor that we had, all the kind of atheist descriptions of pastors and priests as pedophiles and sick people preying on their congregation and grabbing money from them and all of that. Not one of those things is true, even in the most abstract and the most minuscule amounts. The pastor I had, Reverend Arthur Shaw, when I was a young man, child, was breathtakingly well educated. He was kind, he was generous, he was able to listen. He was, in every way that I can categorize him, a good man. My father, who was born into Christianity, was a Christian his whole life, and was buried by me as a Christian, was a good man. My father still remains, in my mind, one of the greatest men I've ever met. He raised me beautifully. He raised me with unconditional love. He raised me with a kind of strength and a kind of love of life and a love of me that I can't imagine doing better. You know, if I am able to hit 40% of how good a dad my dad was to me, to my children, I will consider myself completely successful, and I will stand on a hill and crow. Okay? He is the pinnacle there. And a lot of that was his Christian faith. My mother, also wonderful, was in her heart not a Christian. She wore a hat to church. My mom and dad, who were not wealthy, were some of the biggest donors to the church. My dad led the choir. My mom did the bookkeeping. My sister worked at the church. My brother-in-law was the groundskeeper. We were heavily integrated into the church, and Pastor Shaw was a wonderful, wonderful man, and I was treated great. I loved the church, and I loved Sunday school. And I loved the hymn, This Is My Father's World, which goes, this is my Father's world, and to my listening ears, and so on. The theme we have. As a matter of fact, I still own the house that my mother and father built. They built it themselves. And I asked for some of the books that were on my shelf there to be sent to me, as the woman who lives there now is. She lives there. I don't charge her anything. She lives there so she can maintain the house, and also it helps her out. And she was very, very important woman to my mother in the last years of her life. So kind of trying to pay that back. And she sent me, and almost like a movie scene with a sting and chills, she sent me my Bible and my hymnal.
Oh, wow.
And the Bible in the front said Penn Gillette in the little thing in the front, and was well worn because I read it. And then there was the hymnal, and the hymnal had a bookmark that I made as a child, and I opened it up, and it was "This Is My Father's World." It was the Penn Sunday School theme.
Wow.
Which my favorite tune in church, when the pastor would say, "Are there any hymns that you'd like to hear at the sermon?" I would always say that one, and I stood up to hear that.
Not you today, Penn. Yeah,
Someone else besides Penn, please.
So there is a huge amount of Penn Sunday School that is not in any way sarcastic or smarmy. I loved the idea of a congregation and getting together. And I also loved when I went to Sunday school that our pastor spoke about things that were very, very uncomfortable for a pastor to talk about. My pastor was very comfortable talking about atheism. You know, one of the things he suggested when I was 15 or 16 and searching heavily was that I read the Bible. So I did. And I came back with a boatload, a Noah's Ark load of questions. And the pastor entertained those. And then the pastor finally said, and I've told this story briefly before, but it always sounds snarkier than it is. The pastor went to my mom and dad and said, you know, at youth group, it wasn't called Sunday school, at youth group, which is the high school age group, Penn has been talking about atheism a lot, which I like him doing, but he is being more compelling on the side of atheism than I am on the side of Christianity. And I think maybe I should have my talks with Penn about atheism in private, and he should no longer come to Sunday school. Now, when I tell that quickly and as a joke, it makes him look like some sort of weak monster. But it was done much more sweetly and pleasantly, and he hadn't given up on me, you know. So those who say, well, Penn became an atheist because the Christians in his life treated him badly, could not be more wrong. If anything, I became an atheist because Pastor Shaw and Samuel Herbert Gillette treated me so well, and like what we would like to say ideally Christians would teach. I felt like I had unconditional love, and I felt free and open to talk about anything I wanted. The other thing about Sunday school is a lot of people spoke to me about how important it was to hear people living their lives with atheism. You know, just talking about that. And a lot of people mentioned that after they listened to the radio show with me and Godot, when we would go off on a whole jag about atheism, that was one thing. But then when we talk about our families and just living normal lives as atheists, that actually, I still get people talking to me all the time after the show and saying that means a lot to them.
People were inspired by the idea that atheists could be happy and that we had regular lives and that we were joyful people. You know, people, you know, you're told, well, atheists are monsters. They have horns. They're angry. And we aren't.
We are.
I wish we had horns, but we don't have horns.
We would like horns. We would not like to be angry. There's just no joy in that. So, and also people liked us talking about atheism on the radio show because it stopped us from talking about juggling. Which there are people who are closed off to the idea of people talking about atheism. But there is nobody who wants to hear people talk about juggling. So, Penn Sunday School was a way to get together and in the spirit of Pastor Shaw and in the spirit of my dad, be willing to entertain all those things. My dad, I never lied to him. I told him I was an atheist. And my dad's reaction to that was to try to convince me. And then my dad, and I'm going to try to say this without crying because it's so much what my dad was. My dad used to say often, as a cute joke, but also absolutely real, he would say, after my mother came out as an atheist, and after my sister came out as an atheist, which, was, my mother was in her 80s when she actually said the words, "I'm an atheist," and my sister was in her 70s. And then they quit the church. To give you an idea, well, I'll get to that in a moment. My dad said, when I die, I'm going to have to work so hard to convince God to let my whole family into heaven. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it.
Oh, my gosh.
And I mean, he was aware it was cute and funny.
Yeah.
And I have no doubt he believed it all the way down to his heart. And what finally did it was the Reverend Shaw retired. Another pastor was in there. Maybe another 2 or 3 pastors were in there that I didn't know because I'd gone off with a
David Lee Roth of church pastors.
And then there was a pastor, Pastor Shirley. And Pastor Shirley had taken over the church when my parents were very close to housebound. They would get to church when there was a whole wheelchair van procession thing. They could get into church, but it was a big deal. Maybe there weren't wheelchairs at that point, but it was still a big deal. Walkers, and it was tough if there was snow and stuff. So Pastor Shirley would come by the house, as a good pastor would, and visit my dad was going blind at the time, and had lost part of his foot. And my mother was becoming paralyzed, and Pastor Shirley would show up, was very, very kind to them. Pastor Shirley also lived, she had a roommate who was a woman, and there were rumors going around that Pastor Shirley might be a lesbian. My dad was infuriated by these rumors, not because anything bothered him about her being a lesbian, but because it was nobody's business. My mom and dad were cliche New Englanders in that's nobody's business. My mother tried to watch those Phil Donahue, Oprah type shows because she wanted to talk to Bill Cosby's mother, who was in her bridge club. She wanted to talk to them over cards. And they all watched those shows. All the other older women watched those shows. My mother didn't. So she tried to watch. And the first show she watched had a sister who were living together as husband and wife. This was the scandal they did a whole show on. And my mother said, I just couldn't care. It's their business. I just don't know why anybody cares. Where's there anything to talk about in that? Then she'd watch another show, and there was somebody who'd broken up with, who cares about that? And I remember watching Al Goldstein, the pornographer, with Tom Snyder being interviewed about a court case about Screw magazine. And I happened to be home. I was visiting. I'd been living on the road, but I came home to visit. And we happened to watch Tom Snyder that night with Al Goldstein on, who I knew. And my mother said, well, what magazine do they want to stop? So it's a magazine called Screw, Mom, and it's extremely pornographic. It is extremely, extremely pornographic. And my mother said, well, I've never even looked at a Playboy. I said, I know. And she said, this extremely pornographic? I said, yes. And she said, are they making people read it? I said, no, it costs money to read. So you have to buy this magazine to read it? Well, what are they complaining about? This is a stupid show. Of course you sell that, and then nobody reads it. At least I don't want to. I said, exactly, Mom. So their attitude toward people, I mean, there was a bakery in town in the 70s run by 2 men who were very clearly gay. And some of my dad's friends were complaining that there was this bakery. And my dad said, we buy our bread there because we like fresh bread. Entire argument on gay rights with my father. That was it. That was the entire, we like fresh bread. The entire argument for the entire gay rights movement. Not another comment, we like fresh bread. And my dad said, I enjoy going in there and joking with the fellas. That's it. Get the fresh bread. We're done.
The Gillettes have always been straight shooters, haven't they?
You got fresh bread. You visit my parents. They're happy with you.
And I feel like your dad secretly knew that, like, a compliment from a gay guy about something you're wearing is the highest compliment. Yeah. Better than a straight guy, better than your wife.
Sure.
Yeah.
He was
And fresh bread.
fresh bread.
Oh, we all know.
Yeah.
This trio in here loves fresh bread.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my dad would say occasionally they have pie.
Oh, come
So
on.
you don't need. There's no level of sodomy that cancels out pie.
Yeah. Pol Pot is selling pie. Okay.
So
That's his
Pie.
business.
That's his business.
see, North Korea, they start making fresh bread.
We don't know.
The elders in the church, who are all old men, said that they were going to, they needed to get rid of Pastor Shirley because she was a lesbian. And they then came out with the United Church of Christ. No one knows this. It was an important thing in the history of the United Church of Christ, but no one knows it now. There was a thing called accepting and confirming, I think, which was going to be that they were going to accept gays into the church. And each church had a vote on it. Pastor Shirley voted that our church was in favor of that. She took no vote with the congregation. They went crazy. They went crazy and said, since Northampton was the lesbian capital of the world, San Francisco for lesbians, that the Northampton was only 20 minutes away, and the lesbians were going to come and take over our church if we did accepting and confirming. My mom and dad went crazy. Now, I want to tell you that my mom and dad, I think I'd heard my dad say hell maybe once or twice. He was very angry. My mother would sometimes say, when she saw a spider, get that GD monster off the wall. That was as close as she came to goddamn. That GD monster for a spider. They never said shit.
Every epithet.
They never said shit, as far as I knew. Okay? They were at a baked bean and ham dinner, and one of the elders of the church came over and said, we're signing this petition to get rid of Pastor Shirley. And my mother said, why? And they said, well, she's a lesbian. And my mother said, who cares? And the elder of the church said, well, read your Bible. And my mother then said, I believe that Anton LaVey has never said anything this blasphemous. My mother turned to the elder of the church and said, phooey on your Bible. Can you imagine that? All the fuck gods in the world do not match an 82-year-old woman at a ham and bean supper at a church saying to a church elder, phooey on your Bible. And my parents left the church. They left the church that they had been in for, I think they had been members for 70 years.
Oh my
They
gosh.
left the church over Pastor Shirley. And to give you an idea of the kind of people my mom and dad were, they had tithed to donate to the church. They kept giving money up until the promise was over. You know, in June, people
The end
decided
of the fiscal year.
Yeah.
Yes.
they kept that up till then. So they'd quit the church and then kept paying because they'd promised to.
Oh, my God.
And then after that, my sister and my brother-in-law, so they lost the choir director, the groundskeeper, the bookkeeper. Everybody split over Pastor Shirley being a lesbian, right? which was spun by them as, this is how upset the Gillettes are. They're leaving because she's a lesbian. To which my mother said, I don't care what they think. They're gone. A bunch of old men who are afraid of lesbians. What's wrong with them? These old men, what's wrong with them? So my parents leave the church, and they still give the money. And then they said, when June rolled around, whenever it was, they said to my sister, we have all this money that we give to the church that we now have. What are we going to do with that? And my sister said, let me do some research. And she went and said, it looks like if we put this money together for a whole year's worth of our family and your family, we can buy Jaws of Life for the firemen to be able to open up cars that people are stuck in, and we can buy some bulletproof vests for the local police. So why don't we do that? So they put that money in a fund and kept tithing, and my sister kept finding worthy causes around town.
Nice.
And when my mother told me she was an atheist and had left the church, I said, you know something? I want to warn you about this. Pastor Shirley is going to come to your house, and Pastor Shirley is going to say to you, I know this. I know the way these people work. Come to the church and say, Mrs. Gillette, I know we've had a little problem here in the church, but I don't think it's worth losing your faith. Please don't go overboard, but understand the church is more important than this petty little squabble. Please don't lose your Christianity. My mother said, whatever she wants to say is fine. She's coming over next week. She came over the next week. My mother called me and said, Pastor Shirley said good thinking.
Wow.
So,
but you bring up an important point to me, which is every time I see people come to my house, either Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormon missionaries or whatever, part of me is just heartbroken because of the hours. I'm just like the hours they're committing to this way of doing business, and they believe in their hearts they're going home and feeling like they've done good for the earth. And if they just spent those hours doing anything else.
Anything
really.
else. Composting coffee grounds.
Yeah, raking leaves. Anything would be more useful.
When you go down the strip, and you see the people there holding their crucifixes and shouting at people as they go through that.
Yeah.
Baking bread.
Go bake bread. Compete with the gays. Fresher bread than those gay guys. You're probably doing better.
So my dad died a Christian. My mom and sister died atheist. And my mother said at one point, which I think is probably one of the most important sentences ever said, my mother said, I don't think I ever believed. I just like seeing my friends and wearing a hat on Sunday.
Almost universal.
What Penn Sunday School is seeing your friends and wearing a hat on Sunday. That is our mission statement. Now, postscript.
Yeah.
I went back to Greenfield, Massachusetts, and there are overtly lesbian coffee shops, record shops.
The elders were right.
The elders were 100% right. It's gentrified. It's really groovy. The lesbians did come in. Thank goodness. We're going to tell the rest of the death threat story after these ads.
Now, if you could summarize all that in Korean and French Swahili, will be sad.
Okay. The guy in outside of San Francisco did the death threat.
The first Christian to actually do you wrong.
He
Late to the game, wasn't he?
It was amazing. We did that show, and I get a phone call from my father-in-law, who I liked very, very much. And my father-in-law said to me, Penn, what the fuck are you doing? You have a 1-year-old daughter, you're getting death threats? It was a pretty powerful phone call. I get a call from CBS saying, we will take care of everything. They put an armed guard patrolling my house. You can imagine how that thrilled my wife. Let me just tell you, when you've done something that an armed guard patrols your house at night, I mean, you look out and there's a guy with a gun walking around your house, there's a brittleness in the relationship.
I mean, when I forget that it's garbage night, there's a brittle in my relationship.
Precisely. It got brittle, and CBS started throwing money at it. Now, I called my...
Not the relationship.
Right.
Gave money to his wife.
I called my...
Please stay with him. Please, here's more money.
An armed marriage counselor.
And our office, he tried to... so this is where it gets really important, okay? I call my two most important advisors on anything to do with legal and life and death. I call Bob Corn-Revere, who was a First Amendment attorney who's argued in front of the Supreme Court, been on the show, huge hero of mine.
Yeah.
I call him up, I tell him the story, and Bob goes, I want to take his case for being able to say, kill somebody on the air. That's an interesting free speech thing. But that having been said, I want to think about you as my friend.
Yeah.
He said, I don't know exactly what you do, but I do know that it probably isn't a free speech issue, because otherwise mobsters would be able to call up anybody and say, kill that guy, and that's not free speech. The fact that it's using radio instead of telephone, I don't think mitigates it at all. He said, so I think you're in good shape, but he said, you know, if you take this case to court, every headline will read, Penn should be dead for what he said about Mother Teresa, in which case you've now amplified the death threat. So I suggest you say nothing. I said, okay, thanks. Hung up the phone. Then I called Lawrence O'Donnell Jr. And I said to Lawrence, told him the whole story, and said, what do I do? LOD said, make sure that man is not fired. Do not allow him to be fired. I said, what? He said, your whole job is to make sure he keeps his job. You tell the president of CBS to call him and say, you are not being fired, but you are not allowed to apologize or say a word. You cannot say the word pen, even in the context of pen and pencil. You cannot say pen and teller. You cannot say the word teller. You cannot say the word Gillette. You change the kind of razors you use to shick. The words pen and teller, and Gillette will never be said on your show again, ever. And your full contract will go up. He said, that's what you call and tell the president to do. Because then the story ends there. Nothing else is said. And he is not allowed to apologize. And he's not allowed to defend. Only the people that heard that know about it. You never say a word. Let me tell you something about no comment. No comment does not mean you say no comment. No comment means no comment. Which means when anybody calls your office with a question about this, your assistant says, oh, we've heard nothing about this. We'll get back to you. Then don't get back. Give them nothing they can possibly quote. And you have not heard that this happened. You are absolutely there. You call the president right now and beg for that man's job. I said, really? He said, yes. Anything else gets Penn Jillette should be dead more in the mail, more in the news. You must protect your daughter. Protecting your daughter is keeping his job. I said, but what a fucking scumbag. He said, who cares? There's a scumbag on the radio. Whoopee! He said, you hang up with me and do that. I hang up with LOD. I call the president. I go right through to the president of CBS. I never talked to him before.
Yeah.
Right through the president of CBS, right? And I say...
just through Siri. It was great.
He says, don't worry, he's being fired this afternoon. I said, oh, no.
Funny thing.
No.
Yeah, stop.
I don't want him fired. He said, well, I do. No one gives death threats. I'm president. I don't allow death threats. I don't allow him to talk about me. I hate this fuck. He's fired. And he's fired. His whole crew is fired. His engineer is fired. They're all fired, and they're getting no pay beyond this. I said, I would like him not to be fired. He goes, I don't give a fuck. What? I said, if you fire him, he will go on and say he's been fired, and it'll end up saying, they should kill me more. He goes, well, we're going to give you more protection. I go, I don't want more protection. I want to go away. So please don't fire him.
More protection or less threat?
He said, no, he's going to be fired. I said, please hear me out. And I made a very compelling argument. And he said, that's a fine argument. But I have my morality to deal with, and someone did a death threat on my watch. And there's no way in my morality I can be pragmatic about this. You're doing a pragmatic argument. I must do the moral argument. He'll be fired. I said, please reconsider. He said, nope, hung up. He then called and fired him. Then the press went crazy. He wanted to debate me. Mr. Freedom of Speech wants to go on all this. I want to debate him. Our office was answering the phone like, Penn? Who? What? Huh? The Rio.
What is a radio?
The Rio was having security walk me to and from my car. Then I had an armed guard meet me at home. A private detective was hired by CBS to find out if this guy had a gun permit and to find out where he was. Right? Jonesy said, sue him. I said, good. I'll sue him for everything he's got as a DJ in Northern California. Shut up, Jonesy. He said, well, he's wrong.
16 canned goods.
And a Beretta.
I get those jeans. Get them off.
All rise.
And then the punchline gets really weird, because a few months later, and I remember, of all the times you've been shocked in your life, might this have been the most shocked?
This was really funny, yeah.
Yeah. I get served with papers that he was suing me for wrongful termination. He had proof that I'd called the president of CBS and that I had told him to fire him. The secretary was willing to testify. She put a call through to him. There was a talk with the president. Then he fired him. So Big Bad Penn Jillette, the deep pockets in this, had him fired, and I was being sued for millions of dollars. I called the lawyer that CBS had assigned to me and said, I have a question about these papers that have been served to me. And she said, what is it? I said, my question is, what the fuck? What the fucking fuck? What the fuck? What? She said, that's exactly the question our legal team's been asking. I said, do you mean to tell me that if I'm working at McDonald's and I'm a fry cook, and the cashier comes over and goes, you come into work tomorrow, I'm going to kill you. And I go to my manager and say, the cashier just said he was going to kill me if I come into work tomorrow. You either fire him or I'm not coming in tomorrow. She goes, oh, you can't do that. I said, what? And she said, so you were not allowed to call the president of CBS and tell him to fire? I said, I didn't. She goes, what? I go, I didn't. I called and said not to fire him. She said, you called and said, don't fire him? I said, yes. She goes, why'd you do that? So I told the whole story. Yeah. And she went, oh, that's smart. But he ignored you. I said, yes. So she said, not only should you have a right to have him fired, but also you asked to keep his job. You begged for his job. I said, yes. She goes, well, this could be a great case. And then it goes on. And I found out that if you're deposed, it rips your heart out.
Yes.
Godot was deposed. Have you ever been deposed?
No, but I just know from talking to other people who've gone through lawsuits. And my father was private practice for years before he became a public defender. And he always says, if you can avoid a lawsuit, just get away. Even if you're totally right.
It was horrible.
It just takes forever.
It was horrible.
It takes forever.
And that's the thing. Everyone's deposition strategy is the same, which is to get you exhausted.
Yeah.
And
did you do it? No. Did you do it? No. Did you do it? No.
and Sly and the Family Stone said, you don't cry because you look all broke down, but you cry anyway because you're all broke down.
Yeah.
That summed up everything for me. And they told me it was an elderly Christian real estate lawyer who was doing it pro bono. Up against, I mean, it really is, he's the underdog, up against CBS Radio's law team from LA. We had like 4 people on our side, all being paid hundreds of dollars an hour against a pro bono guy who didn't know anything. And they told me, never help him, never help him. So there was a moment when they said, are you familiar with Bill Carlin's 7 words you can't say on television? I said, no. He said, you're not familiar with Bill Carlin? I said, no. He said, freedom of speech advocate and comedian Bill Carlin. I said, don't know him. He said, you are friends with Bill Carlin. He's been in your movie. I said, not that I know of. He said, you are not familiar with Bill Carlin's 7 words you can never say on television. Yeah. I said, no. He said, you're telling me under oath here in a deposition that you've never heard of Bill Carlin's 7 words you can't say on television. I said, no. He said, you've said other places that you are friends with Bill Carlin. Is that correct? I said, not that I remember. And finally, after 10 minutes, I went, George Carlin, you stupid motherfucker. At which point, my lawyer said, we'll take a recess here. We went out in the hall, and she said, the rest of the day was going to be Bill Carlin. That's just costing them money. Why did you say George? I said, I couldn't take it anymore. She said, you have to take it. And they said, we're thinking of deposing Lawrence O'Donnell Jr. about the conversation he had with you. I called LOD and said, I'm so sorry, I don't want you dragged into this. They also said we're going to call Bob Corn-Revere. They had my court records, my phone records, and I called both of them. We're going to call them, depose them. I called them up to say, I'm going to try to get you out of this. Bob Corn-Revere said, oh, don't get me out of it. He said, what do I like to talk about the limits of the First Amendment? Yes, I do. I've talked about it in front of the Supreme Court. The idea of explaining this to an elderly real estate lawyer on their dime thrills me. Let's go. And then LOD said, you're scared of depositions, aren't you? I said, yeah, I hate it. He said, my mother was a lawyer. My dad was a lawyer. My 3 brothers are lawyers. I don't give a fuck. He said, also, I love talking about myself. I love hearing myself speak. He said, I think I can do 3 days on the phone call with Penn before I get to the fact that I told you to not have him fired. He said, I will love this. I'll play the camera. I'll make jokes. He said, what you are not good at, I am good at. If they bring up Bill Carlin, I will go through every Carlin I knew growing up. I'll say, well, there was Sam Carlin who lived down the street, and we'll talk about him for 2 hours. He said, I love talking. Please get me deposed. Please, 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 please. So we almost had. Now, Godot did not like being deposed.
I did not. It was a long and unpleasant day. Although there was the one moment where I got to say, yeah, and that's the point where your client threatened to have my friend killed? Which I think that they probably weren't happy, that they led me into a position to be able to say that directly.
And I had my Perry Mason moment, my fabulous Perry Mason moment, where he said to me, will you recall the events of this date? And I said, I didn't do any research. I don't know what date that was. And he said, that's the date that my client offered money to have you killed. I said, okay. So I went through the whole day and my father-in-law calling and all of that. And then 2 hours later, he said, you know about comedy on radio and shock jocks, and you've worked with Stern, you've worked with all of these, you know what shock jocks are all about. Tell me honestly, is there anyone that you heard talk about this threat that actually took it seriously and not as a joke? Anyone? I said, yes. He said, would you detail those? I said, you want all of them? I said, yes. I said, starting with today, when I asked you what date that was, and you said that was the date my client said you were going to be killed. I said, as far as I know, there was no laugh in the courtroom. Does the court records show, in the deposition room, court records show a laugh? And I looked over at the videographer and said, did you laugh? Slight chuckle? Were you suppressing laughter? I said to the stenographer, did you write down, parentheses, laughter? I said, so as far as I know, you took that completely seriously. So the first person who told me seriously, going back in chronological order, is you. I thought we were just going to break for commercial. That was the end of it. But no, I had to then go back and say my wife, my father-in-law, Trudeau, my manager, the armed guard walking around my house who came up and said, I'm protecting you because some asshole said he was going to kill you. I said, I had to go back to all of those.
That's why, I mean, you have gone through this experience. Don't you have way more sympathy when they leak deposition video of anything that's going on? Don't you feel like that's so wrong?
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's amazing how the crime I was accused of shouldn't be a crime.
Right.
I also didn't do it.
Right.
CBS had promised to pay all my legal bills and all my fines.
Yeah.
I had nothing on the line. Nothing. I was 100% in the right, and I was completely covered by a giant corporation. And I was on my knees in the men's room vomiting before I went out. And I'm used to talking.
Yeah.
It's amazing how it beats you up. And Godot, you had nothing on the line. Nothing.
Right.
Nothing. No
Still
stakes.
horrible.
No skin in the game whatsoever.
Right.
And
Just the horror that somehow that this could go wrong. You know what I mean? That you're in the middle of a court case where perhaps if you lose, maybe you'll lose your job, maybe you'll lose your home, maybe these things will happen.
And if this happened,
even as remote a possibility as that, imagine for a moment that, okay, Matt, there's a 1 in a million chance we're going to pick you up tomorrow and take you to jail. You're going to lose your house and your family. It's 1 in a million is still too much.
I wake up every day with that fear. Was this before or after the OJ prosecution team botched everything? It's like before and after the OJ case, I imagine makes a huge difference how you feel about getting divorced.
It was a remarkable experience. And so we started up Penn Sunday School. And by the way, the bad guy, I believe is doing a podcast that no one hears out of Texas.
Oh, good.
Every once in a while, we check up on him. How's he doing? What's going on with him? They wouldn't do a summary dismissal, is that what it's called?
Summarily dismissed. I don't know the other way to say it.
They didn't do that.
They didn't throw it right out of court as soon as
it
the first
actually
day.
went through some, then they threw it out. And it was done, and it was over. And that was it. And he got jack shit.
Yeah.
And Jonesy backstage every single night. A guy says kill him and then sues him after threatening to kill him. How does that happen? I said from the very beginning he needs to sue him. He's the one.
We know. 16 canned goods, buddy. All those SpaghettiOs for my kids when they get older.
Thank you, Johnson. Well, we covered original mission statement. We haven't covered anything on the fact list, but we're going to get to that next week. Because for now, this was Penn Sunday School.
That was Penn Sunday School.
Cha-cha-cha.
And to
This year we have like 10 episodes. This is nice.
You become naked.
sang and round us rang the music of the spheres.
This was a very nice fact laid out that Reddy Rich did.
And you saw one item, and here we are.
We're going to be back Wednesday with more items.
Item 2.
And we'll be back Wednesday with answering some more tech questions, and we will not do it in Swahili. This is dedicated to Tom Carlin, Bill Carlin, Hank Carlin, Henry Carlin, anyone but
The whole Carlin family.
George Carlin. You're looking more and more like Dave. Good move.